myself Trisha. Today I'm going to present before you the Poetic Diction, which was from Wordsworth Lyrical Ballad. And Wordsworth added this Poetic Diction in its preface. And why he added? Because he was facing lots of criticism in that. Now we need to know what is Poetic Diction. No, actually, a poet, when he goes to write something, he needs to see the words, the style, the vocabulary, the phrases, or the type of language he need to use there in a poetry. That should make his poetry a well known. It should be read by everyone. Now, when we are talking about different types of phrases, rhymes, vocabs, so each and everyone, different ages of poets uses different kinds of languages, and this choice of word has a significant effect on the quality of speech or writing. Now, if we choose a different kind of or a poor words in our poetry, so it may cause message misinterpretation by the reader. The message which the poet is going to convey will not reach actually to the reader, or they will make a misconception of it. So they should try to use a very good kind of words and the vocabs which is understandable to all the humankind. Now, what are the qualities of a good diction? So, a word or the writer that chooses the word, it must be accurate or right. Okay, if it is wrong, so we will not get the things properly. Now, it should match the words, the phrases should match. It should relate actually, and it should make some sense while we are writing. And the words should be easy to understand, which helps the reader or listener to understand the message being conveyed clearly. Now, so poets should use those languages which are understandable to us. Now, what were the Wordsworth's view? Like Wordsworth defines poetic diction as a language of common man. When a poet is writing, so he should write in a language of a common man. We cannot write in a high language or using a different kind of meter, a phrase which are not understandable. That doesn't make any sense to our poetry actually. It will not convey any message and people will not read your poetry. Okay, so it is not the language of a poet as a class, but a language of mankind, as Wordsworth says. It should be reaching the mankind. It should touch your heart while you are writing the poetry. He was not actually very much happy while he with the neoclassical poets like Dryden and Pope, as their poetic style or their use of language was like a very much artificial kind of poetic language they were using. And according to him, the figure of speech which a poet uses should be organic to the poem, and they should not be added like the ornaments. Like a woman is wearing the ornaments, the people sees it, and it doesn't convey any message. So it should not be added like the ornaments. It should give us some message. The rhyme, the meters, the phrases, it should give some message. It should relate to the poem. It should relate with the feelings of the poet. Since he aimed at dealing with the humble and rustic life in his poetry, he advocates the use of a selection of a language really used by men in a state of vivid sensation. It actually should give a sensation while we are reading poetry. We should relate it. We should be able to relate that poetry with our real life. We should get some knowledge from that poetry. Now, Wordsworth believes that a poet is essentially a man speaking to men, so he must use the language of real men. Suppose we are writing a poetry and we are not reaching to the normal people. Nobody is reading our poetry. Nobody is liking our poem. So what is the meaning of writing that kind of thing, which consists of a very different kind of meter, which is not understandable to us? So we should not use that thing. We should use that kind of language, that kind of diction should be used, which is understandable to the human or the mankind. Now, definition: Now this part gets to an end, and we will go to the definition which was given by the Wordsworth about the poetry. Now, Wordsworth says that poetry is the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings recollected in tranquility. Now here the term spontaneous means automatic. That means the poetry should come in an unplanned manner. For example, I would like to give, suppose a poet is writing a poetry, so he thinks of it, or he sees something in the nature, so he thinks that thing with him. He tries to collect those feelings, what he saw there, what he understood after seeing that thing, what he saw there. He wants to collect those things, and when he collected those things in them, so he tried to sit in a resting place or a comfortable place, and he will relate those things and add imagination to that, and he will give a beautiful poetry to us. So it is said that poetry is a matter of mood or inspiration that comes naturally because of emotion and powerful feelings. And emotion and powerful feelings are the raw materials needed to create poetry. We should see the feelings which are created. We cannot make poetry like normally we cannot make poetry until unless we have a good feeling for it. We cannot, if we are not feeling something from inside, we cannot write poetry actually. Now Wordsworth says that this emotion and powerful feelings which is generated inside the poet is getting mature until they arrive for the delivery. So a continuous flow of this feeling should be there inside a poet, and overflow of powerful feelings. This means that emotions that have to be flowed beyond the limits in order to write the poetry. And it takes its origin and emotions recollected in tranquility. Tranquility here means calmness. So when a poet sits in a calmness, he tries to recall that things which he has seen or which the feelings he had, and he writes the poetry. So when a poet sees something, he have a powerful feeling about that, and when the poet's mind is in a state of calmness, he gets comfort and tries to recollect those feelings and add imagination to it, and thus he or she writes a beautiful poetry. Thank you. Close.